You're not retiring. Not maybe. Not unless something changes. Statistically, you are being funneled into a future where you work longer, retire poorer, or run out of money while you're still alive. Here's how bad it is. In the US, nearly half of families have no retirement account at all, and among the ones who do, the typical working-age household has nowhere near what it takes to fund 20 to 30 years of life after work. And the safety net everyone thinks will catch them? Social Security was designed to replace only a portion of income, and even then, millions of retirees already live on benefits that barely cover rent and groceries. Meanwhile, the cost that destroys retirement plans isn't vacations, it's healthcare. The average couple can face hundreds of thousands in out-of-pocket medical costs over retirement, and long-term care can run thousands per month when you're most vulnerable. Now add the quiet killer, inflation. A comfortable number like $1 million used to sound like freedom. Today, in many parts of the country, it's closer to a temporary runway. And that's why older Americans are working in record numbers, not because they're staying active, but because they're trapped. So if you think retirement is a finish line, I need you to hear this clearly. For most people, retirement has become a financial survival test. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why the retirement crisis is far worse than you think and what you need to do before it hits you. Retiring with debt is the new normal, and it's destroying the golden years. You know what used to be rare? Retiring with debt. Not anymore. Today it's practically the norm, and not just a little credit card balance or an old car loan. I'm talking about mortgages, student loans, medical bills, and even personal lines of credit that follow people into their 60s, 70s, and beyond. The idea that you'd hit retirement with a clean slate, free and clear, is vanishing fast. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, debt among adults 65 and over has quadrupled since 1990. In 2023, over 60% of retirees still had some form of debt, with many carrying balances well into six figures. And the consequences are brutal. That fixed income you were counting on? It's not so fixed when monthly minimum payments keep climbing. A recent Transamerica study found that 40% of retirees are using credit cards to pay for basic necessities, not emergencies, not luxuries, just groceries and utilities. And medical debt? That's a whole other disaster. Older adults are now the fastest growing group of Americans filing for bankruptcy. Not because they were reckless, but because they ran out of options. What's worse is how normalized this has become. Financial advisors have quietly started factoring debt into retirement planning, not as something to eliminate, but as something to manage. Let that sink in. We've moved from, you should be debt-free before you retire, to, let's find a strategy so your debt doesn't eat you alive while you age. And for younger generations watching this unfold, here's the warning. If your plan for the future doesn't include a hard strategy to kill your debt early, you may never be able to afford to stop working. Because the cruel irony of compound interest is this: when you're young, it can build wealth. When you're old, it can silently destroy it. Retiring with debt used to be a sign something went wrong. Now it's just expected. But if you're not ready for it, if you don't make a move now to change course, that monthly payment will be the chain around your ankle long after the paychecks stop. The side hustle retirement fantasy is a trap for the desperate. Let's talk about the gig economy retirement myth. Somewhere along the way, people started treating side hustles like a silver bullet, a backup plan, a bridge to retirement, a way to pad your income in your later years. But here's the hard truth. The side hustle dream is becoming a desperate fallback for people who are running out of time and options. Nearly 1 in 3 Americans over 55 is now relying on gig work, freelancing, or part-time income just to survive, not to thrive, not to build extra savings, but to cover basic bills like rent and food. According to AARP, older adults make up the fastest-growing segment of gig workers on platforms like Uber, DoorDash, and TaskRabbit. And these aren't bored retirees looking for connection. These are people who have no choice. Their retirement accounts are empty or unstable, Social Security is barely enough to scrape by, and they've realized too late that their someday fund never materialized. But here's the catch nobody talks about. Gig work doesn't scale. You don't get paid more the older you get. You don't build equity, and you don't get benefits. There's no paid sick leave, No employer 401k match, no healthcare safety net. It's all hustle, all the time. And if you get injured, sick, or your car breaks down, that income vanishes. Not to mention that age discrimination is very real even in the gig economy. Platforms may not openly reject you, but just try competing with a 25-year-old who can do 5 deliveries an hour on a scooter while you're struggling with joint pain. And here's something even scarier. Many people are counting on these gigs before they've even hit retirement. They're telling themselves, I'll just freelance when I'm older, as if their body, the economy, and demand will all magically line up. That's not a plan. That's a hope. And hope is not a retirement strategy. The fantasy of a cozy side hustle that pays the bills is just that, a fantasy. The reality is a growing class of exhausted elders who are too proud to beg, too broke to stop working, and too invisible to get help. If you're banking on gig work to save your retirement, you need to rethink everything now. You know what no one wants to admit? The multi-trillion-dollar retirement planning industry isn't actually designed to help you retire. It's designed to profit off your anxiety about not being ready. From investment apps to financial influencers to glossy brochures promising peace of mind, there's an entire ecosystem built around monetizing your fear. And the numbers prove it. Americans pay over $140 billion a year in fees to financial advisors, asset managers, and retirement fund providers. That's right, billion with a B. And what do they give you in return? A spreadsheet full of optimistic assumptions, a risk profile quiz, and a promise that if you just stay the course, everything will work out. But here's the part they leave out. The market doesn't care about your timeline. Your portfolio doesn't come with a guarantee. And those 7% average return models? They're built on historical averages, not your actual life. Meanwhile, many of these firms bury hidden fees in their products' expense ratios, advisory fees, load charges that quietly eat away at your savings over time. A 1% fee might not sound like much, but over a 30-year retirement, it can wipe out 6 figures from your nest egg, and don't even get me started on the way they market. Endless articles and videos that shift the blame onto individuals. Are you saving enough? Have you optimized your allocation? Did you start early enough? It's all framed as a personal failing if you're not on track. But the truth? Most people are falling behind not because they were lazy, but because the math doesn't work anymore. Wages have stagnated, costs have exploded, and the safety nets are fraying. Yet the industry keeps selling outdated solutions and optimism, because if they admit the system is broken, their whole business model collapses. So instead, they just double down. New retirement products, new financial gurus, new apps with fresh branding, same false hope. Look, good advice does exist, but it's buried under a mountain of noise. The system isn't designed to deliver financial freedom. It's designed to keep you anxious enough to stay engaged, but never empowered enough to break free. If you don't see how retirement is being sold back to you as a product, you're already losing. The middle class is disappearing and retirement is going with it. Retirement was always a middle-class concept. Not for the rich because they never needed it. Not for the poor because they could never afford it. Retirement as an idea was designed for a stable, upwardly mobile class of workers who could reasonably expect to stop working one day and still maintain their dignity. But now, that class is collapsing. According to Pew Research, the share of American adults living in middle-income households has dropped from 61% in 1971 to just 50% today. That's not a small shift, that's the erosion of the very foundation retirement was built on. Meanwhile, costs of living have exploded in every critical category: housing, education, healthcare, transportation. These aren't luxuries. These are the pillars of a functioning adult life. And if you're spending 60%, 70%, even 80% of your take-home income on basic needs, where exactly is the money supposed to come from to fund a 20 to 30-year retirement? The truth is, the numbers don't work anymore. The American middle class is being squeezed from both sides. Wages have stagnated, adjusted for inflation. The average worker in 2024 makes roughly what they did in the 1970s. But expenses have ballooned. The result? More people living paycheck to paycheck. unable to build the long-term savings that retirement requires. And yet, the expectations haven't changed. We still sell young people the dream of a future where hard work pays off, even though all the math says otherwise. Here's the kicker. The middle class was never just about income, it was about stability, a reliable job, a home you could afford, predictable expenses. Those were the ingredients that made saving possible. But gig work, housing bubbles, student loans, and medical bankruptcies have replaced predictability with chaos. Retirement isn't just being delayed. It's being destroyed by the disappearance of the class that once made it possible. And unless something changes fast, we're heading toward a future where the only people who can afford to stop working are the ones who never had to work for survival in the first place. The retirement age is creeping up, but your body might not cooperate. Working longer might sound like a smart solution to the retirement gap, but what if your body says no? It's easy for politicians and pundits to casually float ideas like pushing the Social Security retirement age to 70, but that's because they're not the ones laying concrete, cleaning hotel rooms, or standing on arthritic knees for 12-hour shifts. A recent study from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College found that only about 50% of workers in physically demanding jobs are still healthy enough to work past age 62. And even among white-collar workers, chronic conditions like diabetes, back pain, cognitive decline, and depression begin to take a toll far earlier than people expect. The fantasy of simply delaying retirement doesn't take into account the hard limits of the human body or the reality that age discrimination in hiring is rampant. Try getting a new job in your late 60s. Try keeping up in a fast-paced office environment when your memory starts slipping or your vision fades. We've convinced ourselves that working longer is a choice, but for many people, it's a painful necessity that comes with rapidly diminishing returns. And here's the twist. Working longer doesn't necessarily solve the math. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, even workers who delay retirement until age 70 still face a 40% chance of running out of money in old age if they haven't saved enough beforehand. That's right. You could slog through another decade of labor, only to still fall short. Meanwhile, healthcare costs are rising just as your health is declining. Medicare doesn't kick in until 65. If you're uninsured or underinsured before then, one bad diagnosis could wipe you out entirely. So no, working longer isn't the magic fix we've been sold. It's a delay tactic, a punt down the field, a strategy born out of desperation, not confidence. The idea that everyone can or should work until they're 70 assumes a level of physical ability and opportunity that simply doesn't exist for most people. Retirement used to be a reward for a lifetime of labor. Now it's become a race between your body breaking down and your bank account giving out. The psychological toll of retirement failure is quietly crippling millions. There's a hidden layer to this crisis that rarely gets discussed, but it's devastating. The emotional, psychological cost of retirement failure. Because this isn't just about money, it's about identity, dignity, and self-worth. For decades, we've tied success to productivity. You are what you do. You are what you earn. You are the job. And then one day, the job ends, and for millions of people, nothing replaces it. The mental whiplash of going from a structured, purposeful routine to a financial cliff is brutal. Studies show that people who retire with insufficient savings face significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even early mortality. The National Institute on Aging found that those with financial insecurity in retirement report up to twice the rate of depressive symptoms compared to financially stable retirees. And it makes sense. You're no longer earning, but you're still spending. You feel like a burden. You start cutting back not just on luxuries, but on social interactions, travel, hobbies, even medical care. Isolation creeps in. And the worst part? Shame. Deep, suffocating shame. Because even if the system failed you, it still feels like your fault. You internalize the struggle. You stop talking about it. You pretend things are okay. That's why this crisis remains so invisible, because people hide it. The man who once owned a business is now quietly living off canned soup. The woman who raised a family is now selling homemade crafts on Facebook just to cover utilities. They don't complain. They just shrink. And for those not yet retired, this fear becomes paralyzing. Financial stress isn't just an inconvenience, it's a chronic psychological burden that rewires how people think. It reduces long-term planning, increases impulsivity, and chips away at hope. When people believe they can't retire, they don't just stop saving, they start emotionally detaching from the future altogether. And that is perhaps the most dangerous part of this crisis. It doesn't just steal your money, it steals your will to prepare, your belief that a better outcome is even possible. The retirement crisis is financial, yes, but it's also a silent mental health epidemic hiding in plain sight. And it's growing every day. The retirement math has changed, but no one updated the instructions. One of the most dangerous illusions keeping people stuck is this. The formulas we're using to plan for retirement are based on a world that no longer exists. For decades, financial planning advice has leaned on a handful of easy-to-remember rules. Save 10 to 15% of your income. Plan for a 4% annual withdrawal from your retirement portfolio. Expect to live off 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. These rules were repeated like gospel in books, blogs, and financial seminars for years. But here's the terrifying part. Almost every one of those rules is now outdated or flat out wrong in today's economic environment. Let's start with the 4% rule, one of the most common guidelines for how much you can safely withdraw from your retirement savings without running out of money. It was developed in the 1990s when bonds yielded 5 to 7%, stocks were booming, and inflation was relatively tame. Fast forward to now. Bonds barely keep up with inflation, market valuations are near historic highs, and inflation has been anything but tame. Financial experts are now warning that a 4% withdrawal rate could drain portfolios too quickly in volatile markets. Some advisors suggest dialing it back to 3% or less, which means you need even more saved just to generate the same retirement income. That alone shifts the goalposts for millions. Now let's talk about that 70 to 80% of your income rule. It assumes you'll spend less in retirement. But tell that to someone dealing with skyrocketing rent, climbing insurance premiums, and thousands in healthcare bills. Many retirees are shocked to find their expenses barely drop, and in some cases even go up, especially if they want to travel, help family, or stay active. Meanwhile, the idea of saving just 10 to 15%? Laughable for anyone starting late, earning modestly, or caring for children or aging parents. A 2023 study from Fidelity found that to reach a secure retirement, a worker in their 30s today may need to save 22 to 25% of their income, annually nearly double the traditional advice. But nobody updated the playbook. We're handing people instructions from the 1980s and acting surprised when they can't make the numbers work. This is why so many smart, responsible adults are falling behind. They didn't fail the system failed to keep up with reality. And unless we start rewriting the rules to match the world we actually live in, the crisis will only deepen. Family isn't a retirement plan. But millions are being forced to treat it like one. This one is hitting families hard, and it's only getting worse. More and more people are being forced to lean on their children, siblings, or extended family just to survive retirement. And while that used to be framed as a cultural norm in some communities, a sign of closeness or tradition today, it's often rooted in pure economic necessity. The brutal truth? The safety net that once included pensions, affordable housing, and guaranteed health coverage is so shredded that the only thing left for many people is family. In 2024, a Pew Research study found that 1 in 5 adults aged 65 and over in the U.S. is now living in a multi-generational household, up from just 6% in 1980. Some of that is by choice, sure, but a growing share is driven by financial desperation. Parents moving back in with adult children, seniors couch surfing between relatives, grandparents working part-time while helping raise their grandkids, not out of joy, but because childcare is unaffordable and retirement savings are gone. And this dynamic is causing immense strain, not just emotionally, but financially on the next generation. A Bankrate survey found that over 60% of millennials and Gen Z are already providing financial support to their aging parents or grandparents. These are people who are still trying to pay off student debt, buy their first home, or raise kids of their own. Instead, they're now acting as retirement backstops. And here's what most don't realize. This burden compounds generational instability. The money Gen X and millennials spend taking care of their parents today, that's money they're not saving for their own retirement. So the cycle repeats. The family becomes the only safety net, and every generation's safety net gets weaker. What makes this all more heartbreaking is that many of the seniors now relying on family did everything right. They worked hard, paid taxes, raised kids, played by the rules. But the math broke. The system shifted. And now they're living with the quiet shame of needing help just to keep the lights on. In a wealthy nation, with the tools to prevent this, we've normalized a scenario where retirement means move in with your kids and hope they're doing okay. That's not a plan. That's a collapse. And it's turning personal relationships into financial lifelines, ones that may not hold when stress, illness, or economic downturns strike. Families are doing their best, but they shouldn't be the last line of defense in a broken system. Here's the gut punch that nobody wants to say out loud. We are living through the slow-motion collapse of retirement as a concept, and most people are just shrugging like it's normal. We're witnessing, in real time, the emergence of the first entire generation that may never stop working, not because they want to keep busy or stay engaged, but because they can't afford to stop. And the terrifying part? Everyone's just adjusting to it. Quietly. Passively. Like it was always supposed to be this way. This isn't speculation, it's measurable. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the labor force participation rate for people aged 75 and older is projected to double in the next decade. In 2024 alone, nearly 1 in 5 Americans over 65 was still working, and not in boardrooms or consultancies, but behind grocery counters, driving buses, cleaning buildings. These aren't golden years passion projects. These are survival jobs. And it's not just boomers. Millennials, once told that time and compound interest would save them, are entering their 40s with lower home ownership, higher debt, and fewer retirement assets than any previous generation at this stage of life. A recent report from the National Institute on Retirement Security found that the typical millennial household has saved only $23,000 for retirement. That's not a safety net, that's a rounding error. Gen Z, coming in right behind them, is already being crushed by rent, inflation, and job market instability before they've even had a chance to think about retirement. For them, it doesn't feel like a delayed goal. It feels like a fantasy, a relic from a more stable past. The promise that once defined American life: work hard, save wisely, and one day you'll get to rest, is being dismantled piece by piece and replaced with a bleak new reality. Work until you drop. And what's worse is the way we've reframed the failure. Instead of sounding the alarm, we call it active aging or redefining retirement. But it's not empowerment. It's coping. It's a slow surrender dressed up as independence. The truth is, most people won't retire. They'll simply reach a point where their body breaks down faster than their bank account. And unless we acknowledge that openly and build systems that reflect the new reality, we're going to see the next 30 years marked not by peaceful retirements, but by exhausted, aging workers barely hanging on. This isn't a trend. It's a humanitarian crisis disguised as a cultural shift. The system was never designed to let you retire, you were just told it was. The retirement crisis isn't just a byproduct of bad luck, rising costs, or shifting demographics. It's the inevitable outcome of a system that was never actually built to provide retirement for the average person. You were just told it was. The entire modern retirement model, Social Security, 401s, Ks, IRAs, employer contributions, has always been a patchwork, a compromise. Social Security was created in 1935 when life expectancy was barely 61. Pensions were built for a workforce that stayed with one employer for life. The 401k wasn't even designed to be a retirement plan. It was an obscure tax loophole for wealthy executives until it got hijacked as a universal solution in the 1980s. Since then, Nearly every change to the system has shifted more risk, more responsibility, and more burden onto you, the worker. You're now expected to be an investment expert, a healthcare strategist, a tax planner, and a fortune teller navigating volatile markets, inflation spikes, and healthcare disasters, all while earning wages that haven't kept up with real costs in 40 years. And here's the part that should make you furious. The people who sold you this dream, the banks, the investment firms, the policymakers, they knew. They knew most Americans wouldn't be able to save enough. They knew wages weren't keeping pace. They knew that pushing retirement risk onto individuals would leave millions exposed. But it wasn't about outcomes. It was about appearances. It was about reducing corporate obligations, lowering government spending, and creating profitable new markets for financial institutions. You became the product. Your anxiety became their business model. The illusion of retirement security kept people working, consuming, and hoping right up until the moment the truth became unavoidable. And now that millions are waking up to the fact that the golden years were never guaranteed, the system offers them, what? A pamphlet? A YouTube ad for a robo-advisor? A half-hearted suggestion to just work a little longer? No, this isn't failure. This is design. Retirement, as most people imagine it, is not a universal right. It was a limited-time offer that expired decades ago. And unless you're building your own path ruthlessly, intentionally, and with eyes wide open, you're not preparing for retirement. You're walking into a trap. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. It just wasn't designed for you. Retirement isn't being delayed anymore, it's being deleted for millions of people in real time. If you wait until it feels urgent, you'll already be out of time, because the moment your body slows down is usually the exact moment the bills speed up. That's the trap. So here's the line you need to remember. The system won't save you and it won't warn you. If this video made you even slightly uncomfortable, good, that discomfort is your early warning signal. Subscribe if you want the truth and the game plan, because the people who prepare now will still have choices later, and everyone else will be negotiating survival at 70.